Let's kick out this explainer by imagining a scenario that honestly seems impossible to bounce back from. Picture a country completely ruined by war. We're talking virtually zero natural resources, infrastructure totally reduced to rubble, and the average per capita income of its citizens, an unbelievably low $79. I mean, it's an environment defined by just absolute crushing devastation.
But here's what's really wild about this. This isn't just one isolated historical fluke. We're actually looking at three entirely different nations, spread across different continents, with completely different cultures that all managed to pull off the most remarkable economic turnarounds in modern history. Seriously, how do you go from absolute ruin to global dominance in the span of just a single human lifetime?
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're decoding the exact strategies that lifted Japan, Germany, and South Korea straight out of the ashes of war and pushed them to the absolute pinnacle of global industry. We're not just doing a history lesson here. We're breaking down a literal blueprint for absolute resilience. So here's our roadmap for today's Explainer. We're going to hit from ruins to riches, Japan's quality obsession, Germany's engineering miracle, South Korea's tech transformation, and then wrap it all up with the blueprint for success.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Japan's quality obsession.
To really get this, you have to look at their starting line back in 1945. With 40% of their urban infrastructure completely wiped out, including entire cities like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan's reemergence definitely wasn't just about putting bricks back together. Daily life was all food shortages and hyperinflation. Overcoming that, it meant forging a brand new, absolute obsession with manufacturing quality. They didn't just want to rebuild. They wanted to totally redefine their identity on the global stage through the sheer, undeniable excellence of their products. You can track this momentum so clearly. They moved from mere survival mode, which was aided by the U.S. Dodge Plan, straight into a period of rapid industrialization. We're talking a staggering 10% annual GDP growth here. By the time we hit the 1970s and 80s, they had fully pivoted into technological leadership. They were completely dominating global electronics and automotive markets with household names we all know, like Toyota, Sony, and Honda.
Now, the crucial point here is that Japan didn't just mandate hard work from the top down. No, they instituted these deep, foundational philosophies like Kaizen. What this meant in practice is that innovation wasn't just left to the executives in boardrooms. It happened at every single level. A worker, right there on the factory floor, the gemba, or the real place, was actually empowered to stop the whole production line and suggest an incremental improvement.
And to support that kind of culture, they built a framework of, honestly, extreme discipline, known as the 5S system: sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustain. By applying these 5 pillars to workplace organization and pairing it up with just-in-time lean production, they ruthlessly minimized waste and completely maximized their productivity. It was a real game changer.
But, it wasn't just cold, robotic efficiency. They blended this operational discipline with deep cultural values like wa, which translates to group harmony, along with the promise of lifetime employment. This combo created a fiercely loyal and highly committed workforce. So by pointing this incredibly unified industrial machine at an export-oriented growth strategy, Japan successfully became the second largest economy in the world by the 1980s.
All right, let's move on to our next case study. Section 2, Germany's engineering miracle.
Just like Japan, 1945 Germany was a landscape of absolute, crushing devastation. Their industrial output sat at a mere 30% of pre-war levels. Their major cities were literally bombed to rubble, and the now divided nation was dealing with millions of displaced refugees. Their reestablishment was definitely catalyzed by roughly $1.5 billion in aid from the U.S. Marshall Plan. But as we know, money alone doesn't build a miracle. It was the specific, highly distinct economic frameworks they engineered with that capital that actually changed history.
The foundational framework they used was Soziale Marktwirtschaft, or the social market economy. Coined by Ludwig Erhard, this strategy was honestly brilliant in its balance. On one hand, it aggressively encouraged fierce free market competition and entrepreneurship. But on the other hand, it purposefully paired that with a very strong social safety net that supported healthcare, education, and workers' rights.
But Germany's true secret weapon wasn't just massive, faceless corporations. It was the Mittelstand model.
These small to medium-sized, often family-owned businesses became absolute global export powerhouses. And they were fueled by a really unique dual education system, one that combined classroom theory with rigorous hands-on apprenticeships. This system produced a highly skilled, highly specialized labor force that was just perfect for precision engineering.
Now, in stark contrast to other nations that kind of fell prey to speculative finance cultures and constant labor strikes, Germany took an entirely different path. They ensured long-term industrial financing through regional banks. And further than that, through a system called Mitbestimmung, or code determination, they legally required worker representation on company boards. The result? Incredibly low labor unrest, and this profound, deep mutual trust between employers and employees.
So, that brings us to our final and perhaps most startling underdog of them all. Section 3. South Korea's tech transformation.
Following the Korean War in the 1950s, this was a divided, war-torn agrarian society with essentially zero natural resources to leverage. But just look at the miracle on the Han River when you break it down into raw numbers. I mean, jumping from a per capita GDP of just $79 in 1960 to over $35,000 today, and pushing life expectancy from 55 all the way to 83 years, it's just a stunning testament to sheer human will and brilliant strategic execution.
So how on earth did they do it? Well, under General Park Chung-hee's 5-year plan starting back in the 60s, South Korea ruthlessly prioritized export-oriented industrialization. They literally climbed the industrial ladder rung by rung. They started out with basic goods like wigs and textiles, then scaled up to heavy industry like ships and cars, and eventually found themselves completely dominating the modern era with semiconductors and massive cultural exports. Their specific secret sauce here was a highly integrated partnership between the government and corporations. The state partnered directly with chaebols, which are these massive family-owned conglomerates like Samsung and Hyundai. Basically, the government provided crucial loans, subsidies, and domestic protection, but it came with strings attached. It was strictly on one condition: massive, highly measurable global export performance. You had to deliver. And to ensure they stayed ahead of the pack, South Korea poured a massive 4.5% of their GDP directly into research and development. That is still one of the highest rates in the entire world. They paired this aggressive tech investment with deeply rooted cultural values of discipline and a profound respect for learning. Add in a stunning 99% literacy rate, and you've perfectly cemented your status as global tech innovators.
All right, let's bring it all together. Section 4, the blueprint for success. So, having explored Japan's Kaizen, Germany's Mittelstand, and South Korea's chaebols, we can see that this Phoenix blueprint across all three nations really boils down to three massive pillars. First, strategic state guidance working in lockstep with private industry rather than fighting against it. Second, an absolute unyielding investment in education to build a disciplined, specialized, and highly literate workforce. And third, an aggressive, relentless target on global exports, competing head-to-head on the world stage rather than just settling for domestic survival.
These nations built literal miracles from the ashes using these exact frameworks. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. Look at your own goals. Look at your career, or maybe your own business. If continuous improvement, specialized skill building, and a relentless long-term vision are powerful enough to rebuild entirely ruined nations, how can you apply these exact same principles to construct your own success story today?